All right, so personal development plans. It can sound a little bit like, something you'd hear in a corporate meeting, but this article we're looking at by Serena Kalin, it seems like it's going for a more approachable kind of vibe.
Yeah, what really jumped out at me was this focus on keeping things simple and actually doable. I think a lot of times people get really overwhelmed with this idea of self-improvement, like it's this huge mountain to climb. But this is like, okay, let's break it down into smaller steps, make it feel manageable.
Right, exactly. It's like you wouldn't just, I don't know, hop in your car and start driving across the country without any kind of plan or map or anything, would you?
No way.
So why approach our own personal growth any differently, right?
Exactly. And just like with a road trip, you got to know where you're starting from. That's Kalen's first step. That's self-reflection piece.
So that's like taking a good, honest look at ourselves, figuring out what are our strengths, where do we maybe need a little work.
Yeah. It's about being really honest with yourself. Like, what are you truly good at? And on the flip side, what are some areas where you struggle? And Kalin even suggests using a self-improvement checklist, which I thought was kind of interesting.
A checklist, huh?
Yeah.
So what kind of things are we talking about here? Is it more about like concrete skills we want to develop or more about, internal shifts, those kinds of things?
Honestly, it can be both. It's really about, whatever areas you want to focus on. So instead of just saying, oh, I need to be better at relationships, you might actually write down, okay, I want to practice active listening, or I'm going to make a point to be more present during conversations.
Wow.
It's about turning those like vague desires into actual things you can do, action steps.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've done a little soul searching. We've got our handy dandy checklist. What's next on this journey of ours?
All right, so now we move on to step 2, and this is a big one. Setting clear, achievable goals. And I think this is where a lot of people, they kind of get tripped up. They set these really vague goals. Oh, yeah.
Like, I want to be happier. But how do you even measure that? So Kalin really stresses the importance of being specific and action-oriented with your goals.
Yeah, so instead of just be happier, it's more like, okay, I'm going to start taking a daily walk in nature.
Yes.
Or I'm going to finally learn that new language I've always wanted to. Things you can actually, do.
Exactly. It's about making it real, turning, I want to be more confident into, I'm going to sign up for that public speaking workshop.
It's about bridging that gap, right?
Yeah.
Between just thinking about it and actually taking action.
100%.
Okay, so now we've got our starting point. We know where we're headed. But how do we actually make sure we stay on track? That's where habits come in, right?
You got it. That's step 3. And this is where the rubber meets the road, as they say. Because it's one thing to have these goals, but if we don't actually create daily habits that support them,
it's all just talk, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
It's got more than just thinking about it, right? Right. It's about taking action, putting in the work. And that can feel daunting sometimes.
Totally. But you know what I find helpful? Breaking things down into smaller steps, those daily actions. And Kalin talks about this too. Like, she mentions simple things, drinking a glass of water first thing in the morning.
Oh, yeah, I love that one.
Or just taking 5 minutes to journal, or even just, making a point to smile at a stranger.
It's those small, consistent things, right?
Exactly. Those little wins that add up over time.
They totally do. And, the thing is, life, it's going to throw us curveballs. It's inevitable.
Yeah.
And that's why I think Kalen's next step, that whole growth mindset thing, it's so, so important.
Okay, growth mindset. We hear that term a lot. But I'm curious, what does it actually look like in practice, especially when things get tough?
It's really about how we view those tough moments. So instead of, I messed up, I'm a failure, it's more like, okay, what can I learn from this? How can I adjust? It's about seeing those setbacks as stepping stones.
So it's like if I'm training for a marathon, which I am not, but let's just say I am, and I have this awful, just terrible run one day. It doesn't mean I give up on the whole goal, right?
Right. It's just data.
Yeah, it's like, okay, maybe I analyze it. Was it the pacing? Did I not fuel properly?
Exactly. It's like, how can I adjust my strategy?
It's about using those challenges to actually improve.
Yes. And you know what? Studies actually show that people with a growth mindset, they're more likely to achieve their goals. They bounce back from those setbacks more quickly and overall just have higher levels of well-being.
So it's like building that mental resilience muscle.
Exactly. And you know what? That leads us perfectly into step 5, which is all about tracking our progress.
Okay.
It's like having that GPS for our personal development journey.
Okay, I like that. But nobody wants to be drowning in spreadsheets and graphs, right? So what are some ways we can actually track our progress that are effective, but also, not going to make us run for the hills?
Right, right. And the good news is, it doesn't have to be complicated at all. Kaylin, she suggests finding what works best for you. So for some people, it might be a super simple habit tracker.
Right.
For others, it might be like a weekly reflection in a journal. Or some people are visual. Maybe they want to make a little chart, mark off milestones.
Ooh, a vision board.
Exactly.
That's a good idea. I like that.
The important thing is, whatever you choose, make sure it's something you'll actually stick with.
Right, because this isn't about, like, punishing ourselves for the days we don't, perfectly stick to the plan. It's more about celebrating the wins.
Yes, exactly. Celebrating the wins, and then, okay, maybe making a little course correction if we need to.
Yeah. And those wins, they don't have to be huge, right?
Not at all.
It's about recognizing how far we've come, even those small steps.
Absolutely.
And I think that ties into staying motivated, which is Kaylin's last step. Because let's be real, that initial burst of excitement, it can be tough to maintain.
Oh, 100%. We've all been there, right? Life happens, we get busy, distractions pop up. It's totally normal. But the key is to have some strategies in place to kind of reignite that fire when it starts to dwindle a bit.
So what are some of those strategies? Like, how do we stay fired up about our goals, even when, let's be honest, we'd rather just be like binge watching our favorite shows?
Well, one thing that Kaylin talks about, and I think it's so powerful, is connecting back to your why. Like, why did you even set out on this journey in the first place?
Oh, yeah.
What are you really working towards?
It's like remembering that bigger picture, like getting out of the weeds a bit.
Yeah, exactly. It's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day and kind of lose sight of that bigger vision.
Totally.
So, I don't know, maybe it's like you want to be more present with your family, or maybe it's like finally starting that side hustle you've been dreaming of. Whatever it is, when you feel that motivation dipping, just like take a moment to reconnect with that deeper purpose.
It's a powerful stuff.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think it's helpful to, take those big ambitious goals and break them down a bit.
Oh, 100%.
Make them feel less overwhelming.
Kaylin talks about that. Yeah, it's like those smaller chunks, they just feel much more doable.
It's like that brick wall analogy, right?
Exactly.
Like each one of those bricks, those smaller actions, it's bringing us closer to that final result.
Yes. It's all progress.
So instead of freaking out about writing a whole book, maybe it's like, okay, I can write 1 page today.
Totally.
Or instead of trying to meditate for an hour, I'm going to start with 5 minutes.
It's all good.
Yeah.
And you know what? As you experience those smaller wins along the way, it creates this like positive feedback loop. You're like, okay, I can do this. I'm making progress.
It keeps you going.
Exactly.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. We talked about self-reflection, setting those clear goals, the importance of building those habits, cultivating that growth mindset, tracking our progress, and of course, staying motivated. And I think what's really clear is that personal development, it's not about like this magical overnight transformation.
Right.
It's not about reaching some imaginary finish line. It really is about the journey.
It's a process, yeah. And it's about embracing that.
Exactly. So no matter where you are on your own journey, remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about taking those consistent steps, those small actions. They can lead to some pretty amazing changes over time.
Absolutely. And on that note, as you're thinking about everything we talked about today, just ask yourself, what's one small step, even if it seems tiny, that you can take today to move a little bit closer to that best version of yourself?
That's a great question. That's something for all of us to think about.
Food for thought.